Welcome to the Veterinary Financial Podcast, where we discuss financial freedom and professional success. I'm Meredith Jones, a veterinarian and financial planner. Our guest today is Amelia Knight Pinkston. She's a veterinarian and integrative health and life coach and the founder of Life Boost with Amelia. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Meredith. So happy to be here.
So great to finally sit down and have a longer conversation with you. We just kept crossing paths, right?
So much. Yeah. I'm so glad we're finally here having this conversation.
Yeah. We were both speakers at the House Call-In Mobile Vet virtual conference, and then we participated on a panel together elsewhere. And so I'm so excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, me too, because I think finances is such an important piece of sustainable success and well-being.
I've heard that you like to talk about 2 ingredients you need for sustainable success in vet med. What are those 2 ingredients?
Yeah. First, I think the big thing that's getting us into trouble is that the way that we have been taught to achieve success doesn't work if we want it to be sustainable and to actually feel good. And that really gets us into trouble individually and then also at the practice level. So the 2 things we need are, 1, we need individually people putting their oxygen mask on first and listening to their bodies and nervous systems and using that to understand what they need to support their energy and really what boundaries they need and to feel comfortable speaking up for those. And that really goes against everything we've been taught, everything that feels natural and comfortable. In so many ways, we're taught just to push through and ignore our bodies. And so that is something that at the individual level we can do. But that's not it. We also do need workplaces and veterinary practices that see well-being as a crucial foundation for sustainable success, not as something that's kind of a nice extra, but really seeing how crucial that is in order to have a thriving, profitable practice. And really thinking, instead of kind of a reactive approach and constantly firefighting, how can we be really proactive in creating environments that support the energy and well-being of the team so that they are happy to be there? And so often in conversations, we're either talking about one or the other. And we need both. I worked in relief for a while, so I got to work in so many different environments. And it was at a point where I knew what I needed in order to practice well. And there were some practices where I would be like, oh, this is great. I feel so good. I'm ending the day. I feel like really fulfilled and energized. And other days where I felt like I had been, hit by a bus and just like, what happened? And so, for anyone feeling stuck, I think it's so important to think about both of those pieces. Think about, okay, am I even feeling comfortable speaking up for boundaries so that my practice even understands what I need to feel fulfilled? But also for the practices, like, are you constantly having to speak up for your boundaries and they're not being respected? Is it just you're spending so much energy trying to just support your well-being? Yeah, if either of those are getting in the way, then it's hard to feel fulfilled.
Definitely been there with always having to speak up for boundaries thing.
Yeah, I think it's important. Sometimes it feels scary for us to speak up for boundaries. And so thinking like, have I actually shared what I need? But yeah, if you're just constantly like, hey, I told you, like, I need to be able to have a lunch break, or I didn't want to be, double booked, or I need a little bit longer appointments, whatever you need. If that's just not being respected, then it's time to think about, is it time for a change?
On this podcast, when we talk about finance, of course, that's one aspect of wealth. But can you talk about the different types of wealth that veterinarians should be thinking about when they're finding their path in vet med?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it is so easy to just focus on finances. That's a big thing. But really, it's like anytime we have financial goals, it's really about what we think the money is going to get us. What is that life? What are those things? And really at the root, it's what feeling am I going to have with those? And so it does help to zoom out and think, okay, let's look at the full picture. And I love listening to your podcast because you do such a great job of really recognizing, let's look at the whole picture. Like, what is the life that you want now so that you aren't just, sacrificing everything you want until retirement. So finances, of course, is one piece, but you also want to think about physical wealth. Like, how do you want to feel? Mental, like, what do you want your thoughts to be? Time wealth is a really important one. So, like, what do you want to have time to do in the day? And social wealth as well. So, what kind of people do you want to have in your life? Do you want to have time to connect with those people? So I love thinking about it in that way so that you can really kind of like write out a description of what does abundance and wealth look like in all of those, so that when you're thinking about finances, you can be thinking, okay, well, how can I be saving for the future, but also be enjoying the life that I have right now. And those 5 wealths came from Sahil Bloom. He has a book, which is great.
What does a rich life mean to you?
So when I think about when I was burned out, I was living in scarcity, really with all of those 5 types of wealth, even though I was finally, I finally had this grown-up career. I had a decent salary. I had a plan for my student loans, but I still was living in the sense of, oh, I can't enjoy my life until I've paid off all those loans. It was like didn't even feel comfortable like splurging on an extra dollar for guac at Chipotle, like things that I absolutely could have afforded. And I was also just at this point where I would wake up and I would already want the day to be over. I just would think, oh, I can't wait for work to be done. And at that point, I just kept thinking, oh, I can't wait for retirement, because I was imagining that's when I could really start enjoying my life. And so now I really think it's richness, and living in abundance now is waking up excited for the day, like grateful for the life that I'm living, and thinking about those 5 types of wealth and being able to have those things now, not sacrificing those or trying to earn them in the future. I'm really grateful that burnout happened now, because it was this beautiful turning point of recognizing I don't want I don't want to spend decades of my life, wishing for something in the future that isn't even guaranteed. And that helped me to really understand, okay, what isn't working right now and what do I need to be able to like have time to connect with the people, have flexibility to do things like travel, and also have a career, and have financial stability.
That makes me think about, how does a veterinarian who's just in the thick of it, just working all the time, stressed out, how do they find the space to start to think about this sort of thing?
One place I love to start is talking about the nervous system and being able to recognize signs of a stress response, because that helps to start understanding, like noticing specific things that aren't working. And our profession, really, we've just normalized operating in survival mode in so many ways. And really, we've been selected and rewarded for traits that are signs that we're already in survival mode. So that pausing and just starting to be observing ourselves and our energy too is a really helpful place to start. So I can go over some of the signs of being in survival mode or a stress response, because often that professionals can see themselves in one or maybe many. The flight response is the perfectionist, the person who can't slow down. They're just constantly busy, maybe even when they know that they need to rest. They feel maybe restless if they've tried meditating or yoga. It just doesn't feel like it's for them, or they just are constantly thinking of things they need to do. Fight mode can be just everything is irritating you. You feel like you have a shorter fuse. There may be this desire to be controlling things. Maybe you feel like I have to do everything because other people don't do it right. There can be the fawn response, and that is really that people pleaser who is very in tune with how other people feel, but not necessarily connected with how they feel. And speaking up for boundaries, saying no, feels very uncomfortable. Then we can see if the nervous system has been overwhelmed or is just feeling too overwhelmed, freeze and shut down. So freeze can be more like maybe your mind is busy, but on the outside, you're frozen. You're kind of like maybe procrastinating, thinking of all the things, but it just feels so overwhelming. You can't even move forward. You may feel kind of like just disconnected. And then shut down is really the nervous system just saying, okay, this has been too much for too long. And instead of more of a high energy state, this is shifting into a lower energy state where you just have no energy, no motivation. You may not really care anymore, kind of feel down and just feel a little bit hopeless. That really describes burnout in so many ways, right? And you don't have to stay stuck there, but that is really valuable information just to know, oh, this something in my environment is just feeling too overwhelming physically, mentally, environmentally, emotionally, and pausing and thinking, okay, what do I need? And the tricky thing is that, when we think about flight and fawn, we have been selected and rewarded for that constant productivity, those impossibly high standards, self-sacrificing, putting others before ourselves. And so often we attribute our success to that too. And so it's really hard to change something when we're also proud of that. I definitely was. I love that I was like the type of person who did tons of things and, I was always busy. But it's important, to recognize, if something's feeling off or they're just always feeling exhausted, noticing, oh, maybe this pattern of my nervous system is contributing to, me not being able to prioritize rest when I truly need it. At the same time, fight and, freeze or shut down, as a society, we tend to really judge those. For fight, maybe we label that as toxic, or freeze and shut down, or like, oh, they're lazy or they don't care. And that kind of judgment and that pressure really just adds more stress to a nervous system that is already overwhelmed. And so that can make it really hard to make changes or to shift out of that state when that judgment is either coming from ourselves or from somebody else.
Tell me more about the OPAL approach.
So that is the approach that I've created to help people to navigate life really in a way where they're using their body and nervous system as a compass to navigate their career and relationships and habits in a way that is working with their energy instead of against it. And it's really designed so that any hard day becomes an opportunity to understand what isn't working and to make an adjustment. So you aren't just stuck in this like cycle of one hard day after another. And so it's OPAL. So the O is for observing a stress response. So that alone, that step is really missing so much in vet med. And so for someone just starting to notice, when in the day are you noticing those kinds of patterns, either in yourself or somebody else? And then the P is pause. So pausing instead of reacting, because when we're in a stress response, our amygdala is taking over. We're in this kind of reactive state. It's kind of like the toddler version of us is in charge. And if we can pause and label, if you're like in this state of like, oh my gosh, I'm so busy, I don't have any time to pause and, to prioritize me, noticing, oh, I'm in the flight stress response right now, and just pausing, that can help. And then A is assess what needs to happen to establish safety, using the 3 C's for clarity and calm. So those are compassion, curiosity, and connection. So it's like in the moment, it could even be as simple as noticing that you're in flight mode and having some compassion for yourself. Like, oh, I see that I'm wanting to get all these things done, and this is feeling really overwhelming. And I also don't want to like continue to spend my day like this. And that could think, getting curious, what do I need? Maybe I haven't had lunch and I just need a little bit of lunch. Or connection can be so many things, but it could be even just reconnecting with your body, maybe doing a little nervous system regulating tool, or taking a deep breath just to pause. And then the final step is L, and that's lower the stressors with the 4 S's, which are solutions to stressors. And those are subtract, speak, support, and switch. And so this is really where throughout the day, if you're noticing things that are draining your energy or causing stress, then thinking, okay, what needs to be adjusted? Is there something I can just take off my plate, subtract? Is there a different way I could be communicating either to myself, speaking kinder to myself or to somebody else? Can I just switch my approach to something or switch my mindset or support, right? Can you ask for help? Does your body need some support? That way, it's just any hard day. You don't have to be like, oh, I hate all this. I'm stuck. It's more like, okay, well, let's make a little adjustment that's doable so that the next day we can try that and see if that works better.
I like that. I like that concept of the daily adjustments. And it's sort of a framework that someone would think through at the end of the day?
Exactly. Yeah. It's like the foundation of everything I teach. And yeah, it's like if you can keep that OPAL approach in mind, and even starting with the first step for anyone listening, I kind of described those stress responses. And so that can be a great place to start of just noticing, are you seeing that? And it's important to note that so often when I describe those, veterinarians are like, oh my gosh, that describes me to a T. Flight and fawn, that was me. I thought that was my personality for so long. And so we can go in and out of those stress responses. You may experience all of them in one day, but we can also get stuck. And then it starts to be called a trauma response. But it's really just anytime our nervous system has been too overwhelmed to process that stress in the moment. And that's when it starts to become just our default pattern and way of navigating life, so that things that aren't truly life-threatening, like someone, asking you to do something and you thinking, oh, I really want to say no, that starts to feel like a tiger is actually chasing you. It feels that scary. And that's because that body and nervous system have learned things like rest or speaking up for your boundaries is unsafe.
You're reminding me of when because I worked overnights as part of a rotation for 8 or 9 years, working emergency. And you're reminding me of when I made the transition into working just day and swing shifts. It was such a change, like you're talking about changes in your personality and that sort of thing. I thought I was an impatient person. Then I realized when I went from working a lot of overnights to not working overnights anymore, that I'm not really an impatient person. It's just that it seemed that way when I was working those shifts.
Yeah, that's such a perfect example, right? And it is like if you're noticing that kind of short fuse, really letting that be that first sign. Like we shouldn't have to be waiting until people are burned out to make a change. And that's when we start noticing these patterns, like this is what happens often for a while before reaching burnout. And so noticing, even if you have a day where suddenly you're a little bit more irritable, just letting that be like, oh, I'm going to pause and think, what has been feeling like a lot lately? It's always going to make sense. So often I talk to clients or vets who are saying like, oh, I have like no energy, no motivation. I don't understand why. But when we pause and get curious about, okay, let's think about why it is understandable that your nervous system is feeling overwhelmed. There's always like a huge list of things that it makes so much sense. And so, yeah, for you, it's so nice to learn about what's the real Meredith, right? When you were in that safe and social, like parasympathetic state, right? That's the real you. And how do you feel when your body is thriving, right? When you're able to connect with just that like content and, joyful version of you. It's so helpful to know that version so that when you start to notice, oh, I'm getting like feeling like I have more of a short fuse, that's not your identity. It's just something needs to be adjusted.
What are the first 2 questions you ask someone who is feeling stuck or drained or overextended or maybe even burnout?
So the first one I ask is, tell me about your dream job in vet med, or maybe it could be out, because so often we are so good at thinking about what is reasonable, right? Trying to figure out all the logistics. And so often we end up negotiating ourselves out of what we truly want before even asking for it. And so the first thing I like to hear is just tell me, like, it doesn't even have to be reasonable. I just want to know, like, what are you really drawn to? Because First, that really helps us to understand, okay, this is the environment where you could truly thrive, but also it's always very reasonable. The vets tend to be kind of timid to share it or kind of saying, this is what I'd really like, but I know that's probably not realistic when it really is. Like, there's so many paths in vet med. You really get to do it the way that works for you, as long as you're allowing yourself to be honest. So that's the first question I like, of like, let's just get out of your head a little bit and let's start to dream and really understand what you want. And then the second is, and what are the specific things in your day that are draining your energy or feeling hard or stressful? And are there specific things in the day that give you energy or that feel rewarding? Because that really helps. Like, it's so easy for our brains to generalize, right? And just to be like, oh, I hate this profession or I hate my job. And that makes it really hard to change. But when you start to notice the individual things, is it a specific client scenario? Is it a certain cases? Is it the days when you're not able to pause and have a brain break or lunch? Now, suddenly, each of those becomes an opportunity where we can absolutely make a switch. And it also helps just to understand more about how their body and nervous system is experiencing the day and figuring out what needs to happen so that they are ending the day with energy left. Because that's the thing. If you have more things draining your energy than giving you energy during the day, then there's just no way that it can be sustainable.
Yeah, I'm seeing more and more vets, whether it's clients I work with or whether it's just in conversations on Facebook groups where people, so maybe they have an idea of what might make the day work better for them, whether it is 5-minute longer appointments or whether it's having all the procedures in one day versus just like 2 hours in the morning or whatever it is for that particular doctor. And I'm seeing so many people it's so hard for them to ask for it, but then when they ask for it, they often get it, like schedule changes, all sorts of things.
Yes. I love that you're highlighting that because I see that all the time, right? They're thinking, oh, like this will never happen, or oh, this would be amazing to have this, but it's not possible. And when they have that courage to have that conversation, so often, their bosses are happy to do that. It's not a problem. It works out for everyone. And it is important to see, like, sharing those things that are going to help you to feel more fulfilled is really an act of kindness for yourself, but also for your boss, because so often they want to know what you need. They don't want to lose you. That's so expensive, right? For one thing. Yet they can't read our minds, right? And so it is such a gift when you tell them what you need instead of just, wishing or thinking, oh, they should just know this. Even though, of course, like for those of us who can relate to people pleasing, we don't want to like say anything. It would be so much easier if people could read our minds and just know exactly what we needed. But the reality is they can't. And so, yeah, don't forget to think, how could this conversation go even better than I imagine versus thinking about the worst case scenario.
Yeah. And another thing I see is vets overextending themselves and just taking on too many shifts. You said you used to work relief. Relief vets are the classic for taking on too many shifts,
Yeah. 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 I heard your episode on relief work. Yeah. And I loved that you guys were highlighting that because it does happen a lot.
Let's talk about how that relates to the nervous system and just explore what's at the root of that sort of behavior.
Yeah. So if we look at that kind of overextension, then it really could be flight or fawn that are contributing to those. So with flight, thinking, oof, I thrive on being busy. I love this, right? It seems like a good idea. We feel proud to have fully booked or overbooked schedule, right? There can be a little bit of this badge of honor and just feeling really good about yourself. And then there's that point where like, yeah, it looked great when you were looking at that schedule, but there reaches that point where you're like, why did I sign up for like this 5th or 6th shift in a row? Like, why did I think that that was a good idea? Or it could be fawn as well. And so that's more maybe practices are coming and asking you to fill in and you feel bad saying no. And so you are saying yes, even though you're already kind of, your body is like, no, I really wanted to have this free day for me. I knew that was important. Yeah. So both of those can definitely contribute. And that's again where if you're noticing your body, so say you had 5 shifts in a row and you are just feeling like you have nothing left at the end of that week, pausing and thinking, okay, what contributed to me thinking that that was a good idea, and what can I do in the future so that I am really protecting, like how many shifts in a row can I do that feels good, and how many do I need to recharge so that going into my next shift I'm actually feeling ready instead of resentful or drained or irritable.
Yeah, I think some relief vets will hit the point where it's just like, oh, but all these people want me and it's amazing.
Right. It feels amazing. And it's also important to note that if they are in the flight stress response, especially, that rest is going to feel uncomfortable. And that's important because we imagine that rest is going to feel amazing, right? But it's not. And so even if we really need that rest, having an open day might actually feel like we are doing something wrong. Or you might find that then maybe you have a day off, but now you're like filling it with like doing all sorts of like errands and home projects. And then you have not actually taken any time for you. And so again, that's like, okay, it's absolutely possible. None of these are things that you are stuck with forever. Your brain and nervous system are very capable of learning new, much more helpful patterns once you start to become aware of them and thinking, okay, how can I teach my nervous system? Actually, it's okay. It is so good to rest and to take time for me. And a day off actually helps me to keep doing this for years and years to come instead of just like powering through trying to make as much money as possible and then deciding you want to leave the profession.
Yeah, and the fawn is the other thing that I think about with myself. Like I used to, and this was especially early career, and as an associate, right? We've talked about relief vets, but as an associate, somebody would ask me, hey, can you pick up this extra shift? And I would think, well, I don't have anything specific planned for that day. I was just going to take the day off. So I guess I could pick up this shift because I don't have a good excuse.
Yeah, so much. Yep. I used to do the same thing. You feel bad. And it is like, well, technically, I don't have anything on my list. And it is so important that as a profession, we are recognizing, like, really seeing that as a part of being professional is that awareness and confidence in how much time do I need off outside of work to recharge in order to be the best doctor that I can be for the patients, to interact with clients in a way that is actually, feeling good, and to be enjoyable to work with my team, to have that brain power and to recognize like you can just say no and you don't even have to explain why.
It's a complete sentence, right?
It is. Yep.
Could you talk a little bit about manifesting? Is it just woo-woo stuff or is there science behind it?
Yeah, so there is good science behind it. It really is about changing your brain filter. So your brain has this filter called the reticular activating system, and it decides what to bring into your conscious awareness because it would be so overwhelming if we were aware of everything in our environment all at the same time. And our thoughts and expectations and beliefs and past experiences all influence what our brain filter decides to show us. And so I love manifesting. You're starting with writing down, thinking about, okay, 6 months from now or a year from now, I'm going to write out a detailed description of my life, the life that I want. One way I like doing it is writing kind of like a thank you note to the universe, like, thank you for this, and just describing what I have in the present tense. But you can also just write out a list of things. And what that starts to do is it is priming your brain to also start to see opportunities for that. I started to have manifestation lists when I was recovering from burnout, and it really helped to open doors that I think I wouldn't have even seen them as opportunities. For example, I was still in my associate role and I wasn't looking for a different position at that point. Like I was also doing some coaching. And so I was feeling pretty good. I knew that way down the line, I wanted to probably do relief work or have a lot more flexibility in my schedule, but I was pretty content then. But on my manifestation list, I was describing like much more flexibility in my schedule and getting to do things having to do with well-being. And a recruiter reached out to me and I said yes to talking to them. I was like, I'm not actually really looking, but down the line, I'm kind of thinking about relief work. And they ended up introducing me to an option that was like perfect, like exactly what I needed. It made going into relief work easy. It was such a supportive community. I ended up getting to, write well-being articles and being involved in that aspect. And, that opportunity, like it always was available. But if I hadn't allowed myself to think about what I actually wanted, I probably would have just said no to that conversation and not have been even open to it. So that's when you start to just allow yourself to think about what you truly want. It does help to see those opportunities and to open doors. And I do also think it's important to, not just like write it and forget it, but I do like at the end of every week, I'll review my manifestation list and think, okay, what things helped me to move forward? Or if I don't feel like I did, what did I learn from this week? And how can I use that to move forward towards what I want to manifest?
I've been reading a lot about hustle culture lately, and you recently said hustle culture programming robs us of actually feeling successful, even when things look good on paper. Could you talk more about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So hustle culture, it is that badge of honor. It really is that flight stress response, right? Of just thinking we constantly have to overextend and do more and sacrifice what we want now for the future, because then we can be really successful. And it really creates this carrot on the stick situation where we always think as soon as I reach this milestone or have this achievement, then suddenly everything is going to be better. It will be worth it. But the reality is that all of those achievements are just a moment. It happens, it feels good for a moment, and then life keeps happening and it's always evolving and there are always new challenges. And if you constantly are living in that mindset of, oh, I just have to push through until I achieve this and then everything will be better, most of your life you end up spending in that pushing through, not allowing yourself to enjoy the present. So it really is about recognizing like the journey is the life, right? That's the most of our time. And so how can we actually be making the journey enjoyable while we're working towards our goals? That's amazing. Like we're all driven professionals. We probably have big dreams and that is beautiful. And how can we also make the journey there, whether that's to financial goals or health goals or career goals, what needs to happen? How can you be working with your body, thinking about those 5 types of wealth so that you're also living in abundance now?
Yeah, this is so awesome. I have taken more notes probably during this conversation than I have in a long time on a podcast.
Oh,
so this is awesome. So how can our listeners get in touch with you?
So I'm Life Boost with Amelia. So my website is www.lifeboost.today. I have a podcast called Life Boost with Amelia, and I'm on Instagram, Life Boost with Amelia, LinkedIn as well, and Facebook. On LinkedIn, I'm Amelia Knight Pinkston. I'm always happy to connect with anyone to chat.
All right. Awesome. So that brings us to our last question. What is your best advice for our listeners?
So I would say this took me so long to realize, but our bodies are the one thing in this world completely devoted to taking care of us. And so of all the things to listen to, it's really your body. And so if something is feeling off in your body, maybe physically, weird signs that, something is off, or if mentally, you're recognizing that some of those signs of survival mode are sounding familiar, just know that your body is giving you this signal that just something needs to be adjusted. And the moment you start having compassion for your body and start allowing yourself to listen, that is going to lead you down the most beautiful, fulfilling path.
Amelia, thank you so much for sharing your perspective and expertise with us today. This has been awesome.
Thank you so much, Meredith. I really had so much fun chatting with you.
Thanks so much for listening. My mission is to help you take control of your finances and build the life you envision. If you'd like to see how financial planning can support your goals, visit allvetfinancial.com and click the Book Now button to schedule a free intro call. Until next time, take care and continue your path to financial success. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered individualized financial advice. If a specific investment is mentioned, it should not be considered a recommendation or endorsement to buy or sell the investment. All investments involve risk. Past performance does not guarantee future results. You are encouraged to seek the advice of a financial professional before implementing any investment strategies discussed. Yay, compliance!